Let's get controversial. For every legendary movie, there's a sequel that quietly vanished, sometimes unfairly, sometimes for good reason. You remember the originals, but do you recall what happened next? Why do some sequels disappear while the classics live on? Get ready, movie detectives. You're about to dig up the lost stories Hollywood would rather you forget. Beneath the Planet of the Apes, 1970. Picture this. The dust is still settling on the mind-blowing twist ending of the original Planet of the Apes, and audiences are still reeling. The Statue of Liberty reveal? That image is burned into the collective memory of movie fans everywhere. So how do you follow up a cultural earthquake like that? With Beneath the Planet of the Apes, a sequel that's equal parts wild, weird, and, for many, totally forgotten. You'd think a sequel to a movie as groundbreaking as Planet of the Apes would be a surefire hit, but Beneath goes off the rails in a way only 1970s sci-fi could. Charlton Heston didn't want to come back, so we get James Franciscus as a new astronaut crash-landing in the same post-apocalyptic, ape-ruled world. The story dives headfirst into an underground society of mutated humans, yes, really, who worship an atomic bomb. It's like someone dared the writers to make things stranger, and they said, challenge accepted. Visually, it's ambitious, with eerie sets, practical effects, and an atmosphere that's equal parts claustrophobic and trippy. The tension is thick as our heroes navigate ape politics above and doomsday cults below. But here's the real kicker. The ending goes darker than anyone expected, obliterating the world in a nuclear blast that feels less like a franchise move and more like a studio saying, let's make sure nobody can make another sequel. Of course, that didn't happen. The Apes franchise kept going for several more movies, but Beneath stands out for its sheer audacity and apocalyptic mood. So why did this movie get buried? Maybe it was too weird for audiences. Maybe it lived in the shadow of its predecessor. But if you want a sequel that swings for the fences and leaves you with your jaw on the floor, Beneath the Planet of the Apes deserves a second look, if only to see how wild studio filmmaking got before franchises played it safe. French Connection: The Cell, 1975. You've seen the original French Connection. Gritty, explosive, Oscar-winning. Gene Hackman as Popeye Doyle, the roughest cop to ever chase a criminal through the streets of New York. The car chases, the tension, the raw realism. It's one of the most celebrated cop thrillers of all time. But did you know there was a sequel? That's right. French Connection 2 quietly dropped 5 years later, and, believe it or not, most people barely remember it even exists. Instead of the gritty streets of New York, this time we're shipped off to Marseille, France. Popeye Doyle is out of his element, a fish out of water in a city where nobody cares about his badge or his attitude. The original's chaos is replaced by a grim, slow-burn detective drama. Hackman is still electric, but the story takes some wild turns. At one point, Doyle is kidnapped and forced into addiction by the very criminals he's trying to bust. It's raw, uncomfortable, and nothing like the action-packed chases of the first movie. Director John Frankenheimer leans into the isolation and despair of Doyle's predicament. The film is all about struggle, language barriers, cultural confusion, and a relentless descent into personal hell. There's still action, but it's less about spectacle and more about grit. You feel every ounce of Doyle's frustration as he claws his way back from the brink, driven by pure rage and the need for justice. So why did French Connection 2 fade from memory? Maybe because it refuses to give audiences the same adrenaline rush as the first. Maybe because the ending isn't neat and there's no grand celebration when the bad guys fall. But if you want a forgotten sequel that dares to be different, that drags its hero through the mud and leaves him standing, not triumphant, but changed, this is it. French Connection 2 is the bruised, battered, and brutally honest follow-up nobody talks about, but maybe everyone should. Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, 1972. By the time the Apes franchise reached its fourth film, the storylines were getting wild, rebellious, and, let's be real, a little bit radical. Enter Conquest of the Planet of the Apes, a movie that took everything you thought you knew about talking apes and flipped it on its head. If you only remember the first and maybe the last of the original series, you're not alone. Conquest is the electrifying sequel that the mainstream totally left behind. Here's the setup. The world has changed. Apes, once circus animals and pets, have become an oppressed underclass, living at the mercy of humans who treat them like living machines. Enter Caesar, the son of Cornelius and Zira, hiding in plain sight as the only talking ape left from the previous films. He's played with wild-eyed intensity by Roddy McDowall, who almost single-handedly carries the film with his simmering sense of injustice. When his human protector is killed, Caesar goes from hiding to full-on revolutionary mode, rallying apes everywhere to rise up against their captors. What makes Conquest stand out isn't just the dystopian setting or the action, it's the sheer nerve of the social commentary. This movie is an open allegory for rebellion and uprising, and it doesn't pull any punches. Crowds of apes storm through a futuristic city, hurling firebombs and fighting riot police. The visuals are raw, the tension is thick, and the ending was so dark it had to be softened for wide release. No happy reunions, no peace treaties, just the birth of a revolution. Why did Conquest of the Planet of the Apes get forgotten? Maybe the world wasn't ready for a sequel this charged. Maybe it got overshadowed by the sheer number of Apes movies. But if you want a sequel that's more than just a cash-in, this one's got the guts, grit, and chaos to surprise even the most seasoned movie fan. Return to Witch Mountain 1978. Let's take a detour from dystopias and disaster to something a little more magical. Remember Disney's Escape to Witch Mountain? That 70s classic with psychic kids, UFOs, and a mysterious mountain? It was the kind of movie you'd catch on TV on a lazy Sunday, all wide-eyed wonder and chase scenes. What most people don't remember is that Disney actually made a sequel, Return to Witch Mountain, and it's just as delightfully bonkers as the original, if not more so. Here's what you missed. Tony and Tia are back, those alien siblings with telekinetic powers and a knack for getting into trouble. This time, they're lured back to the city when a mysterious stranger needs their help. But instead of gentle hijinks, the duo gets tangled up with a ruthless millionaire played with cartoonish flair by Christopher Lee, and his scheming partner, played by the legendary Bette Davis. Their goal? To harness the kids' powers for their own greedy purposes. It's a kidnapping plot, a mind control caper, and a sci-fi adventure all rolled into one. What makes Return to Witch Mountain memorable is its unapologetic sense of fun. There are wild car chases, psychic showdowns, and a towering finale in a radioactive scrapyard that somehow feels both epic and goofy. The effects are charmingly old school, and the energy is non-stop. This is 70s Disney after all. There's even a gang of helpful kids and a goat sidekick who nearly steals the show. So why did this sequel fade away? Maybe it didn't capture the same magic as the first. Maybe its mix of camp and adventure didn't age as gracefully. But there's a fearless weirdness here, a willingness to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. If you've ever wanted to relive the glory days of Disney live-action oddities, Return to Witch Mountain is waiting for you, if you can find it. Airport 1975-1974. Fasten your seatbelt because this one's pure 70s disaster movie gold. You might know Airport as the film that started it all, the template for every disaster at 30,000 feet flick, packed with A-list stars, high tension, and an all-star ensemble stuck in mid-air panic. But did you know Airport spawned not just one but 3 sequels? The first, and most gloriously over the top, is Airport 1975, a movie that turned turbulence into spectacle and then disappeared from most people's memories. The premise is irresistible. A massive 747 collides with a small private plane, tearing a hole in the cockpit and leaving the jumbo jet without a pilot, a co-pilot, or much hope. Enter Karen Black as the world's most stressed-out flight attendant, suddenly thrust into the role of pilot, steering a crippled airplane with nothing but guts and radio instructions from the ground. There's drama, there's panic, there's even a nun played by Helen Reddy, who sings to calm the passengers. It's like someone threw every disaster movie cliché into the script and then cranked up the volume. But here's where Airport 1975 earns its place. The cast is a who's who of 70s celebrities, Charlton Heston, Gloria Swanson, Linda Blair, each hamming it up for the camera. The special effects are pure practical wizardry, all model planes and flashing lights. The suspense is high, But the real fun is watching the characters unravel as the crisis drags on. Can a flight attendant really land a 747? Will the little girl survive her kidney transplant? Why does every disaster seem to happen in the most melodramatic way possible? The movie never answers, but it sure makes the ride unforgettable. So why is Airport 1975 largely forgotten? Maybe it was overshadowed by the original. Maybe audiences just got tired of disaster movies. But if you crave pure 70s spectacle, unapologetic melodrama, and a jet full of stars, this sequel deserves another boarding pass. The Sting 2, 1979. Some sequels are doomed from the start, and The Sting 2 is Exhibit A. The original, The Sting, is a masterpiece of twisty plotting, charming cons, and the unbeatable duo of Paul Newman and Robert Redford. The sequel, released 6 years later, makes a daring move. No Newman, no Redford, no classic chemistry. Instead, you get Jackie Gleason and Mac Davis stepping into brand new versions of the lead roles. The result? A film that barely made a ripple, let alone another big score. Here's the setup. It's the 1940s, and con man Fargo Gondorff is back, only now he's played by Gleason, bringing his own gruff charisma to the part. His old partner Kid Cullors has been killed, and Gondorff is out for revenge against a mob boss who double-crossed them both. The plan? One more long con, with a crew of hustlers, a horse racing scam, and a mountain of 1940s style. It's got all the elements you'd expect. Fake identities, double crosses, period detail, even another ragtime-inspired soundtrack. But something's off. The film tries to recapture the breezy charm of the original, but the magic just isn't there. Gleason is tough, but not as sly, and the twists don't land with the same punch. It feels like a tribute act, lovingly put together, but never quite convincing you it belongs on the same stage. The new cast gives it their all, but the absence of the original stars looms large. So why did The Sting 2 fade into oblivion? Maybe the bar was set too high. Maybe audiences just couldn't accept a new cast in iconic roles. But here's the thing, if you love old-school con artist tales and period capers, The Sting 2 is a curio worth checking out, if only to see how sequels sometimes gamble big and come up short. The 7-Ups, 1973. Blink and you'll miss it. The 7-Ups is a gritty, bruised-knuckle crime flick with a wild car chase at its heart, and it's often called a spiritual sequel to The French Connection. Roy Scheider stars as Buddy Minucci, the leader of a rogue police squad whose tactics are just a bit too close to the line. The team, called the 7-Ups because their busts get at least 7 years in prison, are tough, relentless, and determined to clean up New York City, no matter the cost. The story kicks off with a string of high-profile kidnappings targeting the city's mobsters. The 7-Ups are on the case, but the closer they get, the more dangerous things become. The film's highlight is an absolutely legendary car chase through the streets of Manhattan and the Bronx, orchestrated by the same stunt coordinator who gave us Bullet and The French Connection. It's raw, real, and you can practically smell the burning rubber and feel every jolt as the cars smash through traffic. So why does this one fly under the radar? Maybe because it's not an official sequel, no Gene Hackman, no Oscar hype, but it captures the same gritty gray New York and the same moral ambiguity that made its predecessor iconic. Roy Scheider is magnetic, holding the movie together with sheer intensity. The atmosphere is pure 70s, tough cops, tougher crooks, and a city teetering on the edge. The 7-Ups isn't just a crime movie, it's a time capsule, a reminder of when Hollywood wasn't afraid to make its heroes complicated and its action messy. If you crave the authentic, hard-hitting pulse of 1970s crime drama, this forgotten sequel is begging for a rediscovery. Return of the Pink Panther, 1975. You think you know Inspector Clouseau, Peter Sellers bumbling through one disaster after another, the theme song stuck in your head, all pink-tinted chaos and slapstick gags. But ask even die-hard Pink Panther fans about the timeline and you'll see confusion. That's because Return of the Pink Panther was a comeback no one saw coming, a sequel that nearly slipped through the cracks before turning into a box office hit and then, somehow, faded into the shadows again. Here's the twist. After the first two Pink Panther films, the series stalled out. Peter Sellers had moved on, Director Blake Edwards was doing other projects, and the Pink Panther diamond had been safely locked away in movie history. But in 1975, the original duo returned with Return of the Pink Panther, a film that rebooted the franchise before reboots were a thing. The Pink Panther diamond is stolen again, Clouseau is on the case, and chaos is back on the menu. This isn't just another mystery. This is a masterclass in slapstick mayhem. Sellers is in top form, tripping, bumbling, and mangling the English language while somehow always ending up a step ahead. Herbert Lom is back as Chief Inspector Dreyfus, and every scene between them is comedy gold. There's a globe-trotting plot, a string of jewel thieves, and enough ridiculous disguises to fill a costume shop. The tone is pure fun, with elaborate set pieces, visual gags, and that iconic Henry Mancini score. So, why did Return of the Pink Panther become the forgotten link? Maybe it came too long after the originals, or maybe it was overshadowed by the sequels that followed. But this is the movie that revived an entire franchise, paving the way for years of comedic chaos. If you love clever slapstick and classic comedy, you owe it to yourself to dig up this sparkling, underappreciated sequel. So, how many of these sequels did you actually remember, or did they all catch you off guard? That's the thrill of digging through forgotten film history. Surprises around every corner. Drop your favorite lost sequel in the comments. Hit subscribe for more cinematic deep dives. And remember, sometimes the best stories are the ones almost nobody talks about.